The year 2023 marked a chilling turn in India-Canada relations. What had been a relatively stable and mutually beneficial relationship was suddenly thrust into turmoil, shaking the very foundations of diplomatic ties between the two nations. The assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a prominent Sikh leader on Canadian soil, sent shockwaves through both nations. Nijjar was not just a community leader, he was a symbol of the Sikh diaspora's aspirations and struggles. His death was not merely a local tragedy, but a geopolitical event with far-reaching consequences. Nijjar, a vocal advocate for Khalistan, was gunned down outside a Sikh temple in Surrey, British Columbia. His advocacy for an independent Sikh state had made him a controversial figure, both revered and reviled. The manner of his death, brazen and public, added to the shock and horror felt by his supporters and the broader community. The assassination immediately raised suspicions of foreign involvement. The crime scene, meticulously examined by investigators, became a focal point for media and public speculation. The presence of police and the cordoning off of the area underscored the gravity of the situation. India, long troubled by Nijjar's activism, denied any role in the assassination. Indian officials, facing a barrage of questions, maintained a firm stance, categorically rejecting any allegations of involvement. The Indian media echoed this sentiment, portraying the accusations as baseless and politically motivated. However, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, citing intelligence reports, directly accused Indian agents of involvement. Trudeau's statement was unprecedented, marking a significant escalation in diplomatic rhetoric. The intelligence reports, though not publicly disclosed in full, were said to contain compelling evidence pointing to Indian operatives. This unprecedented accusation triggered a diplomatic firestorm. News anchors around the world dissected the implications, while diplomats from both countries engaged in heated discussions. Protests erupted, with demonstrators waving flags and demanding justice, further inflaming the situation. Both countries expelled senior diplomats, escalating the crisis. The expulsions were a clear signal that neither side was willing to back down. Diplomatic offices, once bustling with activity, now stood as symbols of a fractured relationship. The headlines about the expulsions dominated news cycles, highlighting the severity of the diplomatic rift. The normally cordial relationship, built on decades of trade and cultural exchange, plummeted to a new low. Trade agreements that had once been celebrated as milestones of cooperation were now in jeopardy. Cultural exchange events, which had fostered mutual understanding and goodwill, were overshadowed by the growing animosity. The handshake between Indian and Canadian leaders, once a symbol of partnership, now seemed a distant memory. The world watched with bated breath as two democracies grappled with accusations, denials, and the potential for further escalation. International news anchors provided round-the-clock coverage, analyzing every development. Political discussions grew increasingly tense, with experts weighing in on the possible repercussions for global diplomacy. The assassination and its aftermath laid bare the deep fissures in the India-Canada relationship. Parliamentary discussions in both countries became arenas for intense debate, with lawmakers demanding answers and accountability. Analysts dissected the historical context, pointing to long-standing grievances that had been simmering beneath the surface. It forced a reckoning with long-standing grievances and ignited a debate about the future of this once promising partnership. The debates were not just about the assassination, but also about broader issues of sovereignty, justice, and international relations. Protesters, with their signs and slogans, captured the public sentiment, reflecting a deep sense of betrayal and a demand for change. The split screen of Indian and Canadian flags symbolized the divided loyalties and the complex web of emotions that this crisis had unleashed. Historically, India and Canada had enjoyed a robust relationship characterized by mutual respect and cooperation. State visits by leaders from both countries were often marked by grand ceremonies and optimistic speeches. Joint press conferences highlighted shared goals and collaborative projects, while cultural festivals celebrated the rich diversity and heritage of both nations. Economically, the two countries had much to gain from each other. Trade delegations frequently traveled between New Delhi and Ottawa, exploring new avenues for business and investment. Business summits brought together entrepreneurs and investors, fostering an environment of innovation and growth. Joint ventures in various sectors, from technology to agriculture, underscored the potential for a prosperous partnership. Educational exchanges were another cornerstone of the India-Canada relationship. Thousands of students from India pursued higher education in Canadian universities, contributing to academic excellence and cultural exchange. Academic conferences and research collaborations further strengthened the ties between educational institutions, paving the way for groundbreaking discoveries and innovations. On a community level, the bond between the two countries was evident in the numerous multicultural festivals and religious celebrations that took place throughout the year. These events not only showcased the vibrant cultures of India and Canada, but also promoted understanding and harmony among diverse communities. Community service projects, often organized by diaspora groups, highlighted the spirit of cooperation and mutual support. As the diplomatic fallout continued to unfold, political analysts speculated on the long-term impact of the crisis. Would the relationship ever recover? What would be the economic and political consequences for both nations? These questions loomed large, with no easy answers in sight. The assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar had not only claimed a life, but had also cast a long shadow over the future of India-Canada relations. The international community closely monitored the situation, with world leaders issuing statements and global news outlets providing extensive coverage. The reactions were mixed, with some countries expressing concern over the allegations and others calling for a thorough investigation. The crisis had clearly captured the world's attention, highlighting the interconnectedness of global politics. Efforts to de-escalate the situation were soon underway. Diplomatic meetings were held behind closed doors, with both sides seeking a resolution that would prevent further deterioration of relations. Peace talks and mediation attempts, often facilitated by neutral parties, aimed to bridge the gap and restore a semblance of normalcy. The path to reconciliation was fraught with challenges, but the stakes were too high for either side to ignore. Amidst the political turmoil, the human aspect of the tragedy remained ever present. Candlelight vigils were held in memory of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, with people from all walks of life coming together to mourn his loss and call for justice. The vigils served as a poignant reminder of the personal and communal impact of the assassination, transcending political boundaries and resonating on a deeply emotional level. As the world watched and waited, there remained a glimmer of hope for a future where India and Canada could rebuild their relationship. Images of children playing, community gatherings, and symbols of peace offered a vision of what could be, a return to mutual respect, understanding, and cooperation. The road ahead was uncertain, but the possibility of reconciliation and a renewed partnership remained within reach. The assassination and its diplomatic fallout had tested the resilience of India-Canada relations. Yet, as the flags of both nations fluttered side by side, there was a sense that despite the challenges, the bond between the two countries could endure. The future of this partnership would depend on the willingness of both sides to engage in dialogue, address grievances, and work towards a shared vision of peace and prosperity. To understand the current crisis, one must delve into the annals of history. The roots of today's geopolitical tensions can often be traced back to pivotal moments that shaped the course of international relations. By examining these historical events, we gain insight into the complexities and nuances that define the present-day scenario. The seeds of mistrust were sown in 1974 when India conducted its first nuclear test, codenamed Smiling Buddha. This test was a significant milestone for India, marking its entry into the exclusive club of nuclear-armed nations. However, it also sent shockwaves through the international community, particularly among countries that had supported India's nuclear program for peaceful purposes. Canada, a staunch advocate for nuclear non-proliferation, reacted with dismay. The Canadian government had long been a proponent of limiting the spread of nuclear weapons and had invested considerable effort in promoting peaceful nuclear cooperation. The news of India's nuclear test was met with a sense of betrayal and concern, as it seemed to undermine the very principles Canada had championed. India's nuclear ambitions were seen as a betrayal by Canada, which had provided assistance to India's civilian nuclear program. This assistance was given with the understanding that it would be used solely for peaceful purposes, such as energy production and scientific research. The revelation that India had diverted resources to develop a nuclear weapon was a blow to the trust that had been built over years of collaboration. The Canadian government, led by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, imposed sanctions and suspended nuclear cooperation. Trudeau's decision was a clear message that Canada would not tolerate the proliferation of nuclear weapons, even if it meant severing ties with a long-standing partner. The sanctions included halting the supply of nuclear materials and technology, which had a significant impact on India's nuclear program. This marked a turning point in the relationship, casting a long shadow over future engagements. The once strong partnership between India and Canada was now marred by suspicion and mistrust. Diplomatic efforts to mend the rift were complicated by the deep-seated grievances on both sides, and the shadow of the nuclear test loomed large over every interaction. While diplomatic relations resumed in the following years, a residue of suspicion lingered. Efforts to rebuild trust were slow and fraught with challenges. Both nations were wary of each other's intentions, and every move was scrutinized through the lens of past betrayals. The nuclear issue remained a sensitive topic, often resurfacing in discussions and negotiations. The nuclear issue became a touchstone for Canadian anxieties about India's strategic ambitions. Canada's concerns were not limited to the proliferation of nuclear weapons, but also extended to the broader implications of India's growing military capabilities. The fear was that India's nuclear arsenal could destabilize the region and trigger an arms race, with far-reaching consequences for global security. This underlying tension provided fertile ground for future disagreements to take root and flourish. The mistrust that began with the Smiling Buddha test continued to influence Indo-Canadian relations for decades. Every diplomatic dispute, trade negotiation, or strategic dialogue was colored by the lingering doubts and unresolved issues from the past. The legacy of the nuclear test served as a constant reminder of the fragility of trust in international relations.